Hello everyone, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. Welcome to this new initiative by the Legacy IAS where we are bringing you a consolidated information for the 2023 mains exam from the subject that is anthropology. And in yesterday's video, I have briefly discussed why is anthropology the most sought optional in the entire UPSC optional list. And I've given you multiple reasons why is anthropology very easy to study and how can you enhance your marks using the current affairs examples and also the case studies. If you have not watched yesterday's video where I have talked about the physical anthropology and also the tribal anthropology, I would strongly recommend you to go back, watch the video, and then let's continue with today's video. See, today and from today we'll be coming up with a series of videos, like probably 8 to 10 videos on the anthropology, where we will be talking about the most important topics in the entire paper 1 and the paper 2. Clear? So let's begin with today's session with unit 9, that is physical anthropology. So yesterday I've told you what is physical anthropology and what all do we have in the physical anthropology, and the physical anthropology part of the UPSC syllabus under the paper 1 stretches from unit 9 to unit 12. Okay, so unit 9, it's a very huge one, to unit 12, 9, 10, 11 and 12, the 4 units of the paper 1 deals with the physical anthropology. This is also, you can also call this as biological anthropology, and you can also call this as genetics part. Okay, so this is the most scoring part, I would say, in the entire paper 1, followed by archaeological anthropology. If we start with what all do we have in the unit 9, see, today we'll be talking about 3 most important and the most basic things under the genetics and also the under unit 9. Okay, so things that we'll be talking about today are 3 important topics. One is pedigree analysis. I'll be telling you what this pedigree analysis is about and what is the significance and what is the application of the pedigree analysis. Why do we actually conduct pedigree analysis? That's the first thing. Second thing we'll be studying about is the nature and the nurture concept. Okay, what is this concept of the nature and the nurture? And we'll be studying about some of the biologists and also anthropologists and their view about nature versus nurture. Okay, see, nature versus nurture is also a part of your sociology and also the philosophy and also psychology for that matter. The third and the last important topic that we'll be studying about is the twin study. Okay, so let's begin with the 9.1. If you look at the syllabus, what's mentioned in 9.1, if you look at this, methods for study of genetic principles in man, also family study. What are the methods? Pedigree analysis, first one; twin study, second one. Okay, so both these combined will give us some solid information about nature versus nurture. Okay, so these are the 3 important topics, and remember, these 3 topics forms the core of the anthropology. If you want to understand the entire unit 9, 10, 11 and 12, and if you want to have a significance, if you want to appreciate this particular topic, you will have to understand what pedigree analysis is all about, what nature versus nurture study is all about. See, these things are very general, but still we will have to know what these things actually are. If we start with the pedigree analysis, what is this pedigree analysis? Clear? See, pedigree analysis is very, very simple. It just talks about what is the pattern of inheritance from the parents to the offsprings. Okay, if you want to trace the origin of any particular trait, if you want to trace the origin of any particular trait for that matter, how do you trace it? Through the parenthood, and that process is called as pedigree analysis. And through the pedigree analysis, for example, if there is any disorder, if there is any disorder with the offspring, if we want to know that particular disorder has been inherited from the father or the mother, how do we trace the origin of that particular trait? We use something called as pedigree analysis to trace the origin of the trait or to trace the origin of inheritance. So this is what you will be writing in the introduction if at all there's a question on pedigree analysis. Correct? The first thing to know, why do we actually do it? Okay, why should we conduct pedigree analysis? First thing, if at all there is any disorder that I told you, if at all there is any disorder, if you want to trace the origin of that particular trait, then pedigree analysis is very, very crucial. Second, for the genetic counseling, for example, the disorder is already present. Okay, it's already there, it's visible. Then how do you change it? what is the solution to come up with? How do you repair that particular gene so that the disorder is solved? Okay, so if you want to do that, we have a process called as genetic counseling, and that is also called as gene mapping. Okay, so for the process of the gene mapping and the genetic counseling, the pedigree analysis forms the crucial base. Third, critically informed matings are not always possible. For example, if you talk about the mating between a man and a woman, so it is not always possible that you will get the medical examination done before getting married. Okay, that is not always possible, though it might be possible in some cases. In most of the Indian marriages, you don't find this a common thing. So critically informed matings, that is biological fecund matings, are not always possible. For this reason, the abnormalities are so common. And that too, if we talk about the consanguineous marriages, the marriages between the people who are very closely related, the disorders are very much common. So because of these three reasons, in order to trace the origin of the disorders or the trait for that matter, the pedigree analysis is very, very crucial. Okay, very important. So what are the types of the pedigree analysis? Okay, see, this entire analysis is, you already know that it is classified into 4 different categories. One is called as autosomal dominant. By this time, you would know some of the terms, like for example, allosomes, and you have an autosome. Okay, autosome and the allosome are very much interrelated. You know about the allosomes, you know about the autosomes. You have a dominant here, which means you should also have a recessive. So these are the 4 terms that you should be knowing before understanding what this pedigree analysis is all about. One is autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant, and the X-linked recessive. Okay, so these are the 4 different types of the pedigree analysis, and you would have studied about this. See, what you should know from the exam point of view whenever there's a question on the pedigree analysis, which is a 15 marker question or a 20 marker question, is that you should know the introduction. And for all these 4 different types of the pedigree analysis, you should be able to come up with an example and also a chart. I'll be showing you how to write a chart for the autosomal dominant and the autosomal recessive. Let's not get into X-linked dominant and the X-linked recessive, because you would know this. I'll just give you an information. I'll just show you how do you actually carry out this particular autosomal dominant and the autosomal recessive chart along with the example. So if you look at the autosomal dominant characteristic, what is this autosomal dominant? By this time you would know what is autosome and what is an allosome. Autosome are those chromosomes except the sexual chromosomes. For example, we know that X and Y are the chromosomes which carry or which determine the sexes. But for example, the autosomes are the one which determine your eye color. Autosomes are the chromosomes which determine your hair texture. Autosomes are the genes which actually are the chromosomes which actually decide how tall do you grow. So such chromosomes are called as autosomal chromosomes. And the example of the autosomal chromosome is the Huntington disease and polydactyly. Clear? So how do you write a chart? Okay, what is the inheritance pattern of this particular autosomal dominant characteristic or pedigree analysis? How do we carry out the pedigree analysis? Let's consider AA cross AA. Okay, these are the alleles. And this capital A will be an infected allele. Small a is a non-infected allele. Okay, it's a non-infected allele. Capital A is an infected allele. So if you want to make a chart, AA with AA, if you look at this 4 offsprings, this is the F0 generation and this is the F1 generation. Okay, so in this, if you look at these 2 alleles or these 2 combinations, we know that the capital A here is an infected one, and because this is autosomal dominant, this infected A dominates and these 2 are the infected ones. If you look at these are non-infected ones. Correct? This is how you will have to make a chart for autosomal dominant characteristic. The examples are the Huntington disease and the polydactyly, and these two diseases which follow the autosomal dominant characteristic will get inherited like this. This will be the inheritance pattern of the autosomal dominant characteristic. Now, if we look at the second one, autosomal recessive. Okay, so what do we have under the autosomal recessive? If we look at the autosomal recessive, there are few examples. One is cystic fibrosis and albinism. Okay, how does this get into AA? The similar pattern of the checkerboard. How will this albinism or the cystic fibrosis gets inherited to the next generation? If you write this AA, 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 AA. Correct? Again, the notation remains the same. The capital A is an infected one, the small a is a not infected one. Okay, so if you look at these two alleles, because you have a infected one here, that is capital A, and remember in the autosomal dominant we said that because it is infected, these two individuals will be infected because it's a dominant characteristic. But here it is a recessive characteristic, it's not a dominant one. Because of this, we call in the F1 generation as carriers. These two individuals are called as carriers because they are carrying an infected allele. And in the next generation, F2 generation, if we talk about, if there is a mate between these two individuals, which means the two individuals who are carriers, then if you look at this, you will have AA infected, you will have AA uninfected, you will have AA infected, you have AA. Okay, these four individuals, if you look at this individual is very much infected, these two are carriers, this is not infected. Okay, so if at all there's a question that you're trying to answer with respect to the autosomal recessive characteristic, that is cystic fibrosis and the albinism, one thing that you should know is that you can't stop your answer here. You will have to talk about the F2 because here it's a carrier gene we are talking about. Okay, I hope you have understood the autosomal dominant and the autosomal recessive. On the same lines, we have X-linked dominant and the X-linked recessive also. And if it's a 20-mark question, I would strongly recommend you to complete all these because you will have to talk about the autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant, and also the X-linked recessive if the question is asked for 15 marks or 20 marks. Okay, so with this, we complete pedigree analysis, and you will have to write the significance, you will have to write the application of the pedigree analysis also. Clear? So, looking at the next topic under the unit 9 is nature and nurture, or nature versus nurture. See, in order to understand this in a simple layman terms, I would put it in this way. Nature is something that talks about the inheritance. Nurture is something that has an influence of the environment. For example, how do we understand the nature and the nurture? I'll just give you two examples. One, the color of an eye. Okay, eye color. Second, the language or the accent. Correct? Consider these two traits. One is the eye color, second one is the language or the accent. Okay, so if I give you options for eye color, what determines the eye color? Is it the environment that determines the eye color? No, environment has a least impact on the eye color. Then what has a more impact on the eye color? The inheritance pattern. Inheritance pattern has a influence on the eye color, which means here we talk about nature, which means we can conclude that the eye color is a trait. Eye color is a trait which is least influenced by the nurture and heavily influenced by the nature. That's all. On the same lines, language or the accent. You can say if you have any of your close friends or relatives who have been to Western countries like Western Europe and also the America, 2 or 3 years down the line, their accent would completely change. Okay, so which means the way you speak, the way you pronounce will not be determined by the gene or the inherited trait, but it will be influenced by the environment. Okay, so such traits which are influenced by the environment are called as nurture. Simple. So in the debate of the nature versus nurture, all we are doing is classifying a particular trait, whether and determining whether it is influenced by the nature or whether it is influenced by the environment. That's all. So this is an ongoing debate. When did it start? It started somewhere in the 1900s. So Francis Galton was a biologist and also an anthropologist, was the first one who coined this term of the nature versus nurture debate, and he was the one who started the influence of inheritance and also the environment. He was the one who actually gave birth to this debate of the nature versus nurture, and then it was taken over by Plato. Plato came out with a theory, and Plato said every individual is born with some inherent characteristics and traits. Okay, so this is what the Plato said, which means Plato gave a lot of importance. Plato gave a lot of importance to nature over nurture. As soon as a baby is born, that's what the Plato said. Okay, as soon as the baby is born, he is inherited, or he is imbibed, he or she is imbibed with some basic characteristics. John Locke, one more philosopher, John Locke came out with a concept called as tabula rasa. Okay, what is this tabula rasa? He says tabula rasa is an empty sheet of paper, or he says it's a slate, but updated version we can assume it to be an A4 size sheet paper. So as soon as a person is born, he's like an A4 size sheet blank paper here, and you can write whatever you want, which means John Locke gave a lot of importance to nurture and not nature. Okay, so such debates started happening. Francis Galton started this, then we have Plato coming up, then we have John Locke who told about tabula rasa. So such debates kept on happening in the field of anthropology, and finally we had two important case studies to understand the importance of the nature and the nurture. One is called as Minnesota graded home study, second is called as Chicago studies. Okay, in the Minnesota graded home study, two class of people or children was taken. Two classes of children. One were the labor class, second were the managerial class. The children of laborers and the managers, the 5 children of the laborers and 5 children of the managers were taken, and they were interchanged. Labor class children grew up in the managerial class homes, managerial class children grew up in the labor class homes, and over a period of time, 3 months or 5 months down the line, their IQ was analyzed, their IQ was tested. It was found that the managerial class children who grew up in the labor class home had more IQ than the labor class children who grew up in the managerial class home. So this indicated that these managerial class children who were born here, okay, which means their traits, the influence of the inherited traits were greater than the influence of the environment. Okay, environment did not alter their IQ. So this is what is the Minnesota graded home study. So if you talk about the Chicago studies, Chicago studies was also on the same lines, a case study that was done with a group of children, and these children were put into good, average and the bad homes. Okay, so once they were put into good, bad and the average homes, and after that their IQ was tested, and once their IQ was tested, it was found that the children who grew up in the good home had a greater IQ than the children of the average home, and were more than the bad home. So these are the two important case studies that were conducted. One is Minnesota and the other one is Chicago, which proves that the nature and the nurture debate is very, very true. So this is a very important case study to understand nature versus nurture. Okay. Now, what are the recent studies with respect to nature and the nurture? The recent studies are, like for example, let's assume that a child who is born to the parents who are suffering from diabetes, both the parents are suffering from diabetes, and the child is born, and the child is very active. He was put into a sports school, and it was a dream of his or her father to make that particular individual a sports person. Okay, so from a very young age, from the age of 1, 2 or 3 maybe, he started following a very strict diet. The father made him follow the very strict diet, and a lot of exercises were done to excel in that particular sport, and that individual went ahead and won a gold medal for the country. Okay, so this might sound hypothetical, but this can be true, very very true. And this individual, who was an offspring of both the parents who were suffering from diabetes, though inheritedly, though by nature he had all the potential to develop diabetes by the age of 30 or 35, because of his strict diet and the exercises or his gym workout, he did not develop diabetes till the age of 60 or 65. Okay, so though there is an influence of the nature, but if you take care of the nurture, if you take care of the environment, then that trait will take a long time to express, or it might not express also. If you want me to give one more example, an individual who is born to playback singers. Okay, for example, the son of Sonu Nigam, not necessarily that he'll be very good at singing from the birth. Okay, he'll not be good at it. Even though if he is good at it, if he's not trained, he'll not be able to perform well. Okay, so though he will have some traits in him, and those traits or those skills should be finely polished with a lot of hard work, only then he can become a good singer. So which means nature of the nurture is not a contrast, it's not black and white, it's not whether you have the nature or the nurture, it's always the combination of the nature and the nurture that will define a trait. So this is a recent influence with respect to the nature and the nurture study. One is singing, second is the high blood pressure or the diabetes, third is a person called Augustine Kong, who said the nature versus nurture is not a debate, it's about the intensity of the nature and also the intensity of the environmental influence. Okay, so these are some of the recent examples. So if you look at the third important topic for the day, that is twin studies. So yesterday I've told you about what these twins are. Twins are the people who are born at the same time for the same parent. Okay, so there are two important types of twins. One is called as monozygotic twins, the second is called as dizygotic twins. So what are these monozygotic and the dizygotic twins? Monozygotic twins are the twins who are a part of same placenta. So dizygotic twins are if the birth happens because of two different placenta, okay, then it will be called as dizygotic twins. So always remember, monozygotic twins are always identical, and dizygotic twins most of the time they're non-identical twins. Okay, the gender might be different, gender might be same, we're not getting into it. So the monozygotic twins are always identical, dizygotic twins are always non-identical. So in order to understand the type of inheritance with respect to the twins, we conduct concordance discordance study. See, I gave you an example of the concordance and the discordance study. The example that we already discussed was the eye color and the language. So if you consider the monozygotic twins who are very much identical in nature, if you take them and analyze the eye color, more or less their eye color will be very very identical. I would say 99.9% of the times their eye color is the same, which means the concordance rate is high with respect to eye color. At the same time, if you look at the language, let's consider the monozygotic twins only. Monozygotic twins which are reared apart. One twin is reared in India, the co-twin is reared in Pakistan. Okay, just an example. And if you look at their language after 10 years, do you think it will be same? Not at all. Okay, so here the rate of discordance is the difference. The rate of discordance is higher with respect to language. See, this is what is called as concordance in the discordance study. We take a lot of traits, hair color, hair texture, the posture of walking, the posture of sitting, the way of speaking. So everything is considered, and we map the concordance and the discordance, and we look at the percentages, and then we analyze this particular trait. This particular trait has a lot of influence from the nature, and this particular trait has a lot of influence from the nurture. So this is simply the way we conduct twin studies. We've talked about Minnesota graded home study, and we've also talked about the concept of the nature and the nurture. So the twin studies also helped the anthropologists and the biologists to solve the puzzle of nature versus nurture. So this is how you will be concluding, and make sure you try to correlate multiple concepts that are there in the syllabus that you have studied. So suppose we have studied pedigree analysis, we have studied nature versus nurture, and we are linking the nature versus nurture to the twin studies. Okay, this is what is expected from you when you're writing the answers in the anthropology. So with this, we'll come to the end of the lecture. If you've liked the video, hit the like button. For more such enriching content, subscribe to the Legacy IAS Academy. Have a nice day.